The single shot that echoed through the night sky of Willow Creek changed everything for Savannah Brooks. In the dimly lit saloon, where she had sought refuge after fleeing her past, that gunshot marked both an ending and a beginning on that fateful evening in 1876. The Wyoming Territory was unforgiving, but as she would soon learn, it also held unexpected chances for those brave enough to grasp them. Savannah's hands trembled as she wiped down the bar counter, her mind still replaying the moment when the local sheriff had arrested the man who'd been hunting her for months. Frederick Daniels, a businessman from St. Louis who had once been her employer and later her tormentor, was finally in custody. Yet his arrest brought her little comfort. The damage had already been done. "You look like you could use something stronger than that rag," a deep voice observed. Savannah startled, looking up to find a tall stranger watching her from the other side of the bar. His features were partially obscured by the shadow cast by his hat, but she could make out kind eyes that seemed to see right through her practiced composure. "I'm just fine, sir," she replied, straightening her shoulders and tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "What can I get for you?" "A whiskey would do nicely," he said, placing his hat on the counter and revealing a head of dark hair with a hint of curl. "Name's Isaac Blackwood." Savannah nodded curtly and poured his drink, careful to avoid his gaze. She'd learned the hard way that men's kindness often came with strings attached. "You're new here," Isaac observed, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Been here 3 months," she replied without elaboration. "That's new by Willow Creek standards," he said with a small smile. "Folks around here measure time differently. 3 generations on the same plot of land is barely enough to be considered settled." Despite herself, Savannah felt a corner of her mouth twitch upward. She'd noticed that about the locals, their curious mix of wariness and pride regarding newcomers. The saloon was emptying as the night wore on. The piano player had long since stopped, and only a few stragglers remained at the tables, nursing their drinks or losing the last of their money in card games. "You planning on staying?" Isaac asked after a comfortable silence had settled between them. "I haven't decided," Savannah answered truthfully. With Daniels in custody, she had options now, though none that particularly appealed to her. Going back east held nothing but painful memories, and she had few skills that would serve her well elsewhere. "This town could use someone like you," Isaac remarked, "someone who keeps to themselves but notices everything." Savannah gave him a sharp look. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he said, finishing his drink. "I know you came here running from something or someone. I know you work harder than anyone in this establishment, and I know you never let any of these fools get too close." "Observant for a stranger passing through," she said coolly. "Who said I was passing through?" Isaac replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I've got a small ranch about 10 miles outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." Before Savannah could respond, the saloon doors swung open violently, and the sheriff burst in, his face grim. "Daniels escaped," he announced, looking directly at Savannah. "Knocked out my deputy and took off on his horse. You need to be careful, Miss Brooks." The color drained from Savannah's face as she gripped the edge of the bar. Everything she'd started to build here was crumbling in an instant. "When?" she managed to ask. "Not 20 minutes ago." "I've got men searching, but he's got a head start." Isaac stood, his posture suddenly alert. "You need somewhere safe to stay," he said to Savannah. It wasn't a question. "I have a room upstairs," she replied automatically. "A room everyone in town knows about," Isaac pointed out. "Sheriff, any idea which way he headed?" "Tracks suggest north, but he could double back." Isaac nodded, his expression hardening. "Miss Brooks, I'd like to offer you shelter at my ranch until this situation is resolved. It's remote, defensible, and no one would think to look for you there." Savannah stared at him, suspicion warring with desperation. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Isaac repeated softly. "And around here, we don't leave folks to face danger alone." The sheriff cleared his throat. "It's not a bad idea, Savannah. Blackwood here is one of the few men in this territory I'd trust with my life. Former Army scout, knows this land better than most." Savannah looked between the two men, her mind racing. Stay and risk Daniels finding her, or go with this stranger who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare? I need to get some things, she said finally. Isaac nodded. 5 minutes, I'll have my horse ready out back. Savannah hurried upstairs to her small room, grabbing only what was essential: a change of clothes, the small derringer she kept under her pillow, and the locket containing the only picture she had of her parents. As she stuffed everything into a satchel, she caught her reflection in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Her green eyes looked back at her, filled with a fear she thought she'd left behind. When she returned downstairs, the owner of the saloon, Mr. Holloway, was waiting for her. "You come back when this is all over, you hear," he said gruffly. "Best barmaid I've had in years." Savannah nodded, touched by his concern. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Holloway." Outside, Isaac was waiting with 2 horses, his own sturdy chestnut gelding and a smaller mare for her. "Can you ride?" he asked, helping her secure her satchel to the saddle. "Yes," she replied. Her father had taught her as a child, though it had been years since she'd been on horseback. "Good. We'll need to ride hard for a while, just in case Daniels has friends watching the roads." As they rode out of town, Savannah couldn't help glancing over her shoulder at the cluster of buildings that had been her home for the past 3 months. She'd never intended to stay in Willow Creek for long, but something about the small frontier town had drawn her in, perhaps the way everyone minded their own business, or how no one asked too many questions about a woman traveling alone. The night air was cool against her face as they rode, the sound of hoofbeats steady on the hard, packed dirt. Isaac led them off the main trail after a few miles, guiding them through a stand of pines that concealed their path. "How did you end up in Willow Creek?" Isaac asked as they slowed their pace slightly, the horses picking their way carefully through the trees. Savannah hesitated. She'd perfected the art of deflection, of keeping her past locked away where it couldn't hurt her again. But something about Isaac's straightforward manner made her want to be honest, if not completely forthcoming. "I needed somewhere to start over," she said. "Somewhere no one knew me." Isaac nodded, not pressing for more details. "I understand that. Most folks out here are running from something or someone." "What about you?" Savannah asked, suddenly curious about this man who had offered her sanctuary. A shadow crossed Isaac's face, visible even in the dim moonlight. "War has a way of changing a man. After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Virginia. Too many ghosts, so I headed west, worked as a scout for a while, then saved enough to buy my own piece of land." "You fought for the Confederacy?" Savannah asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Isaac's laugh was without humor. "No, madam. Union through and through. But my family was in Virginia, and coming home a victor to a defeated land didn't sit right." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The moon was high when Isaac finally pointed to a ridge in the distance. "My place is just beyond that rise. Not much to look at, but it's peaceful." As they crested the ridge, Savannah saw a small cabin nestled at the edge of a meadow with a barn and corral nearby. A creek wound its way through the property, catching the moonlight like a silver ribbon. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Isaac smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "It's home." They approached the cabin and Isaac dismounted, helping Savannah down from her horse. Up close, she could see that the cabin was small but well built, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. "I'll see to the horses," Isaac said. "Make yourself comfortable inside. There's food in the pantry if you're hungry." The inside of the cabin was tidy and sparsely furnished: a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, a bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes, and a bed in one corner. A colorful quilt was folded neatly at the foot of the bed, the only decorative touch in the otherwise utilitarian space. Savannah stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their situation. She'd gone from a busy saloon surrounded by people to alone in a remote cabin with a man she barely knew. When Isaac returned, he seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said, gathering the quilt and a pillow from the bed. "You take the cabin." "I can't put you out of your home," Savannah protested. "You're not putting me out," Isaac insisted. "I've slept in worse places than my own barn. Besides, it's only temporary." Savannah wanted to argue further but was too exhausted from the events of the day and the long ride. "Thank you," she said simply. Isaac nodded. "Get some rest. We'll figure out our next steps in the morning." After he left, Savannah sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. Frederick Daniels was free and undoubtedly looking for her. The life she'd carefully built for herself in Willow Creek was once again in jeopardy. And now she was dependent on the kindness of a stranger with kind eyes and a gentle manner, but a stranger nonetheless. She had learned long ago not to trust too easily, not to believe in the goodness of others. And yet, as she lay down on Isaac's bed, surrounded by the simple comfort of his home, she couldn't help but feel that perhaps, just this once, her instincts had led her to safety rather than danger. Morning arrived with a gentle knock on the cabin door. Savannah sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented by her unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night came rushing back as Isaac's voice called through the door. "Miss Brooks, I've got breakfast ready whenever you are." Savannah ran her fingers through her tangled hair and straightened her rumpled clothes as best she could. "I'll be right out," she called back. When she opened the door, she found Isaac standing on the porch with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He'd already been up for hours, judging by the fresh split wood stacked by the door and the smoke rising from an outdoor cooking fire. "Hope you slept well," he said, handing her one of the mugs. "Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. The rich aroma reminded her how long it had been since she'd had a proper cup rather than the weak brew served at the saloon. "I made some johnnycakes and bacon," Isaac said, gesturing to the fire where a cast iron skillet sat on a grate. "Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you going." "It smells wonderful," Savannah said, surprised by how hungry she felt. "Thank you." They ate breakfast sitting on the porch steps, watching as the sun climbed higher in the sky, burning off the morning mist that clung to the meadow grass. Birds called to each other from the surrounding trees, and in the distance, Savannah could see Isaac's small herd of cattle grazing peacefully. "So," Isaac said finally, setting his empty plate aside, "we need to talk about what happens next." Savannah nodded, her momentary peace evaporating as reality intruded once again. "I can't stay here forever." "No," Isaac agreed, "but you can stay until Daniels is recaptured or moves on. Sheriff Jenkins is a good man, he won't stop looking." "You don't understand," Savannah said, staring into her coffee. "Frederick Daniels isn't the type to give up. He's obsessive." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "What did he do to you, Savannah?" The use of her first name startled her, but somehow it felt right coming from him. Still, she hesitated. Her story wasn't one she shared willingly. "You don't have to tell me," Isaac added quickly, seeing her discomfort, "but I might be able to help more if I understood what we're up against." Savannah took a deep breath. "I worked for him in St. Louis. I was his secretary at his shipping company. At first he was professional, even kind, but then he started to take an interest in me. I rejected his advances as politely as I could, but he became increasingly persistent." She paused, gathering her courage to continue. "One night, he asked me to stay late to finish some important correspondence. When we were alone, he tried to force himself on me." Isaac's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Did he hurt you?" "I fought back," Savannah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I managed to get away, but not before he made it clear what would happen if I ever told anyone." She pulled up her sleeves slightly, revealing a thin scar that ran along her forearm. "A reminder," he called it. Isaac's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. "I'm sorry that happened to you. No one deserves that kind of treatment." "I left that night," Savannah continued, "packed what I could carry and took the first train west, but he followed me. Every town I settled in, eventually he would find me: Kansas City, Topeka, Denver. Each time I would start to feel safe, he would appear. And now Willow Creek," Isaac said. Savannah nodded. "I thought I'd finally gone far enough, that a small town like this would be beneath his notice. Men like Daniels," Isaac said, his voice hard, "they don't see reason. They only understand force." "I won't let anyone else get hurt because of me," Savannah said firmly. "Once I've rested, I'll move on. Maybe California this time." "Running isn't the answer," Isaac said. "Sooner or later, you'll run out of places to go. What other choice do I have?" Savannah asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. "We stand and fight," Isaac said simply. Not just you. You're not alone in this anymore, Savannah. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. In the morning light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence of years spent in the harsh sun. His dark hair was shot through with the occasional strand of silver, and a scar ran along his jawline, partially hidden by stubble. But it was his eyes that held her attention, blue as a summer sky and filled with a determination that made her want to believe him. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he'd offered her sanctuary. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "Because there was a time when I needed someone to stand with me, and no one did. I won't be that person, the one who looks the other way." Before Savannah could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both tense. Isaac stood quickly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay here," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If anything happens, there's a rifle under the bed and ammunition in the drawer beside it." Savannah nodded, her heart pounding as Isaac moved cautiously toward the edge of the porch, positioning himself to see the trail leading to the cabin. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly as a familiar figure came into view. "It's Sheriff Jenkins," he called back to Savannah. The sheriff looked tired as he dismounted, his horse showing signs of hard riding. "Blackwood," he greeted with a nod. "Miss Brooks, glad to see you're both all right." "Any news?" Isaac asked, coming down from the porch to meet him. "Nothing good," Jenkins replied grimly. "Daniels has hired men 3, maybe 4 guns from what we can tell. They're asking questions all over town, offering money for information about Miss Brooks." Savannah felt her blood run cold. "Has anyone told them anything?" "Not that I know of," Jenkins assured her. "Folks in Willow Creek may gossip amongst themselves, but they close ranks against outsiders. Still, it's only a matter of time before someone lets something slip, especially with the kind of money Daniels is flashing around." "What about Daniels himself?" Isaac asked, staying at the hotel, acting like he owns the place. "Claims he's just looking for his wayward fiancée who stole from him." Jenkins spat on the ground. "Disgusting piece of work, if you ask me." "He's no fiancé of mine," Savannah said, anger momentarily overriding her fear. "Nobody with sense believes him," Jenkins said. "But he's careful, hasn't broken any laws I can arrest him for. Not yet, anyway." "So what do we do?" Isaac asked. Jenkins removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I came to warn you to stay put for now. Don't come into town. I've told folks I sent Miss Brooks on the eastbound stage, hoping Daniels might take the bait and leave." "And if he doesn't?" Savannah asked. "Then we deal with him here," Isaac said firmly. "My land, my rules." Jenkins nodded in agreement. "Blackwood's right. This is probably the safest place for you right now. Remote, defensible, and Blackwood here is no slouch with a gun." "I can't ask you both to risk yourselves for me," Savannah protested. "You didn't ask," Jenkins pointed out. "We're offering. That's what folks do for each other out here." After giving them a few more details about Daniels and his hired guns, Jenkins prepared to leave. "I'll try to keep an eye on them, maybe convince them to look elsewhere, but be prepared just in case." As the sheriff rode away, Savannah felt a strange mix of emotions: fear and gratitude, despair and hope. She turned to find Isaac watching her, his expression thoughtful. "You still want to run?" he asked quietly. Savannah considered the question. Running had become second nature to her over the past year. Each new town had been just another temporary shelter, another place to hide until Daniels inevitably found her. But she was tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of never belonging anywhere. "No," she said finally, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "No more running." Isaac's smile was warm. "Good, then let's make sure you have somewhere to stay." The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. During the day, Isaac taught Savannah about ranch life, how to care for the horses, mend fences, and even shoot more accurately with both his revolver and the Winchester rifle he kept in the cabin. In the evenings, they would cook together and talk by the fire, sharing stories of their lives before Willow Creek. Savannah learned that Isaac had grown up in Pennsylvania, the son of a blacksmith. He joined the Union Army at 18, served with distinction as a scout, and emerged from the war with skills but no desire to return to his former life. The West had called to him with its promise of open spaces and new beginnings. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Missouri, her parents' early deaths from fever, and her struggle to support herself in a world that offered few opportunities for women on their own. She spoke of her dreams of someday owning a small business, perhaps a dress shop or a bakery where she could be her own mistress. "You could do that here," Isaac suggested one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Willow Creek's growing. There's talk of the railroad coming through within a year or two. Town could use a good bakery." "Are you trying to convince me to stay?" Savannah asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. "Maybe," Isaac admitted with a small smile. "Place grows on you after a while." "It has its charms," Savannah agreed, her eyes meeting his briefly before looking away. On the fourth day, Sheriff Jenkins returned with supplies and news. Daniels was growing increasingly frustrated with his lack of progress in finding Savannah. He'd even started threatening some of the townsfolk, alienating the few who might have been sympathetic to his cause. "He's getting desperate," Jenkins warned as he helped Isaac unload the supplies. "Desperate men make mistakes, but they're also dangerous." "We'll be ready," Isaac assured him, glancing at Savannah, who was checking the loads in the revolver Isaac had given her. She handled the weapon with growing confidence, no longer flinching at the weight of it in her hands. After Jenkins left, Isaac suggested they ride the property boundaries, both to check his fences and to give Savannah a better sense of the terrain in case they needed to defend it. As they rode side by side through the rolling meadows, Savannah felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Despite the threat hanging over them, there was something liberating about facing it head-on rather than constantly fleeing. "You've changed," Isaac observed as they paused to let their horses drink from the creek. "How so?" Savannah asked, curious about how he saw her. "You stand taller. Look people in the eye more. There's a strength in you that was hidden before." Savannah considered his words. "I suppose I've realized I'm tired of letting fear dictate my life, and," she hesitated, "I'm not alone anymore." Isaac's expression softened. "No, you're not." The moment was interrupted by a distant sound that made both of them tense, the unmistakable crack of a rifle shot, followed by another. "Get down," Isaac shouted, dismounting quickly and pulling Savannah from her horse. They crouched behind a large boulder as another shot kicked up dirt near their feet. "Looks like Daniels found us," Isaac said grimly, drawing his revolver. "Stay low. The cabin's too far. We need to make it to those trees." Savannah nodded, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "How many do you think there are?" "At least two, from the sound of it," Isaac replied, peering carefully around the edge of the boulder. "They're up on that ridge, and probably another coming around from the east." "What's the plan?" "I'll draw their fire. When I do, you run for those pines," Isaac said, pointing to a stand of trees about 50 yards away. "I'm not leaving you exposed," Savannah protested. "I'll be right behind you," Isaac promised. "But someone needs to get to cover first, and you're faster than me." Before Savannah could argue further, Isaac fired 3 quick shots toward the ridge, forcing the hidden shooter to duck. "Now," he shouted. Savannah ran, keeping low, her legs pumping as she sprinted toward the tree line. She heard more shots behind her, the distinctive sound of Isaac's revolver answering the rifle fire from the ridge. Just as she reached the shelter of the pines, she turned to see Isaac running toward her, firing as he went. He was almost to the trees when a shot rang out from a different direction, and Isaac stumbled, clutching his side. "Isaac!" Savannah cried out, raising her own revolver and firing toward the source of the shot. Her bullet found no target, but it forced the shooter to take cover, giving Isaac the precious seconds he needed to reach the trees. "I'm all right," he gasped as Savannah helped him behind a large trunk. "Just grazed me." Blood was seeping through his shirt, but the wound indeed appeared to be a graze rather than a direct hit. Still, it needed attention. "We need to get back to the cabin," Savannah said, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound temporarily. "They'll be watching it," Isaac said through gritted teeth. "We need another option." Savannah thought quickly. You mentioned an old line shack on the north end of your property. How far is it? About a mile, but we'd have to cross open ground to get there. Not if we follow the creek, Savannah pointed out. The banks are steep enough in places to provide cover. Isaac looked at her with newfound respect. That might work, but we'd have to leave the horses. Better than leaving our lives, Savannah replied firmly. Can you walk? I can do more than walk, Isaac said, standing with a slight wince. Lead the way, Miss Brooks. They moved carefully through the trees until they reached the creek, then began making their way along its winding course. The water was cold as they occasionally had to wade through deeper sections, but it helped mask their trail from any pursuers. As they traveled, Savannah kept glancing at Isaac, concerned about his injury. Though he maintained a stoic expression, she could see the pain in his eyes and the growing dampness of the makeshift bandage. Tell me about this line shack, she said, trying to keep his mind occupied. Why do you have it? Built it my first winter here, Isaac explained, his voice tight but steady. Was living in a tent while constructing the main cabin, but an early blizzard caught me by surprise. Threw up the shack in 2 days as emergency shelter. Kept it maintained since then for when I'm working the far pastures. After what seemed like hours of careful progress, they finally spotted the small structure nestled against a hillside. It was crude but solid, with a single window and door and a stone chimney similar to the one on Isaac's cabin. They approached cautiously, but there was no sign that Daniels or his men had discovered it. Once inside, Savannah helped Isaac to the simple cot while she searched the small space for supplies. To her relief, she found a medical kit, some preserved food, matches, and a lantern. There was even a small stove for heat and cooking. You keep this place well stocked, she observed as she lit the lantern, careful to keep the light shielded from the window. Lesson learned from that first winter, Isaac said, attempting to remove his bloodied shirt. Never know when you might need shelter. Savannah helped him with the shirt, trying to ignore the way her heart quickened at the sight of his bare chest, even with the angry red wound across his ribs. She focused on cleaning the injury with water from a canteen and the whiskey she found in a cabinet. Isaac hissed as the alcohol touched the wound. You've done this before, he observed, watching her efficient movements. My father taught me basic medicine, Savannah explained, applying a clean bandage. Said a woman should know how to tend injuries as well as sew a straight seam. Wise man, Isaac murmured. Once his wound was dressed, Savannah helped him into a clean shirt she found in a trunk, then prepared a simple meal from the preserved foods. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and she built a small fire in the stove, careful to use only dry wood that would produce minimal smoke. We should take turns keeping watch, Isaac said as they sat side by side on the cot, the only seating in the sparse shelter. I'll take first watch, Savannah insisted. You need to rest. Isaac looked like he wanted to argue but was clearly exhausted from blood loss and their difficult journey. Wake me in 4 hours, he conceded. As Isaac slept, Savannah sat by the window, revolver in hand, peering out at the moonlit landscape. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the shots, the fear, the way Isaac had been willing to sacrifice himself to ensure her safety. No one had ever put themselves at risk for her before, certainly not a man she'd known for less than a week. What kind of person did that? And what did it say about her that she was willing to trust him so completely after years of trusting no one? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft groan from Isaac as he shifted in his sleep, his face momentarily contorting in pain. Without thinking, Savannah moved to his side, gently brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. His skin was warm but not feverish, a good sign. As her fingers touched his face, Isaac's eyes opened, looking up at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Sorry, she whispered, withdrawing her hand. I didn't mean to wake you. I wasn't really asleep, he admitted, sitting up carefully. Too many thoughts. About Daniels. About you, Isaac said quietly. About how someone who's been through what you have can still show such kindness, such strength. Savannah looked away, uncomfortable with the admiration in his voice. I'm not strong, I've been running for a year. Sometimes running takes more courage than standing still, Isaac said. You did what you had to do to survive. Their eyes met, and Savannah felt something shift between them, a recognition, an understanding that went beyond words. In that moment, she knew that whatever happened with Daniels, her life had already changed irrevocably. "We should make a plan for tomorrow," she said, breaking the intensity of the moment. "We can't stay here indefinitely." Isaac nodded, his expression becoming focused. "Daniels and his men will search the cabin first, then fan out. They don't know this land like I do, which gives us an advantage. What if we set a trap?" Savannah suggested. "Use their unfamiliarity against them." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. "I like the way you think, Miss Brooks." They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, formulating a plan that would turn the hunters into the hunted. As dawn approached, they both managed a few hours of restless sleep before preparing to set their plan in motion. The morning was foggy, providing additional cover as they made their way toward the main cabin. They moved cautiously, staying low and using every bit of natural cover the landscape provided. When they reached the edge of the trees overlooking the cabin clearing, they could see two men searching the structure while a third kept watch outside. There was no sign of Daniels himself. "3 men," Isaac whispered. "More than I expected. Daniels must be elsewhere," Savannah replied. "Probably waiting for confirmation that they've found me." Isaac nodded in agreement. "That works in our favor. We deal with these 3 first, then Daniels." The plan they had devised was risky but played to their strengths. Isaac would create a distraction at the barn, drawing at least one of the men away from the cabin. Meanwhile, Savannah would circle around to the root cellar, where Isaac kept an old buffalo gun, a massive .50 caliber rifle that would give them a significant advantage. "Be careful," Isaac said, squeezing her hand briefly before they separated. "You too," Savannah replied, feeling a surge of determination. No more running, no more fear. Today, she would reclaim her life. She moved silently through the trees, making her way to the back of the property where the root cellar was dug into a small hillside. As she reached it, she heard the commotion begin, a crash from the direction of the barn, followed by shouts and gunfire. The distraction worked. From her position, she could see 2 of the men running toward the barn, leaving only one guarding the cabin. Savannah slipped into the root cellar, quickly locating the massive rifle and ammunition exactly where Isaac had described. The buffalo gun was heavier than she expected, but she managed to load it and make her way back to the edge of the clearing. By now, the gunfire had intensified. Isaac was pinned down in the barn, exchanging shots with the 2 men who had taken cover behind a water trough. Savannah positioned herself carefully, steadying the heavy rifle against a tree trunk. She had never fired such a powerful weapon before, but Isaac's lessons over the past few days had prepared her well. She took a deep breath, aimed at the water trough, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked her off her feet, but the effect was dramatic. The bullet tore through the metal trough, sending water gushing out and forcing the 2 men to abandon their cover. Isaac didn't waste the opportunity, hitting one in the shoulder and forcing the other to retreat toward the cabin. Savannah quickly reloaded, focusing now on the man still guarding the cabin. He had noticed the commotion and was moving to assist his companions. She aimed carefully, not at the man himself, but at the porch support near him. Her second shot splintered the wooden beam, sending debris flying and causing the man to dive for cover. Isaac emerged from the barn, firing systematically as he advanced. His face was set in grim determination, his movements precise despite his injury. Savannah provided covering fire with her revolver, having left the buffalo gun behind after her second shot. The tide of the battle was turning in their favor when a new sound cut through the gunfire, the thunder of approaching hooves. Savannah looked up to see Frederick Daniels himself riding hard toward the cabin, flanked by 2 more armed men. "Isaac," she called out in warning. Isaac spotted the newcomers and changed direction, making for a stone wall that would provide better cover against the increased opposition. Savannah moved as well, trying to circle around to join him, but found herself cut off as one of Daniel's men spotted her and opened fire. She ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. They had planned for 3 adversaries, not 6. The odds had suddenly shifted dramatically against them. "Savannah," Daniel's voice called out, sickeningly familiar. I know you're out there. This has gone on long enough. Show yourself and I might let your cowboy friend live. Don't listen to him, Isaac shouted. He's lying. A shot rang out and Isaac grunted in pain. Savannah's blood ran cold. Next one goes through his heart, Daniels called. You have 1 minute to show yourself or he dies. Savannah closed her eyes, her mind racing. She couldn't let Isaac die for her, not after everything he had done. But surrendering to Daniels would mean a fate worse than death. Before she could decide, the sound of more hoofbeats reached her ears, many more than before. Opening her eyes, she peered around the tree to see a sight that made her heart leap. Sheriff Jenkins riding toward the cabin with at least a dozen armed men behind him. Daniels, Jenkins' voice boomed across the clearing. Drop your weapons, you're surrounded. Confusion erupted among Daniels' men. 2 immediately threw down their guns, while another attempted to flee only to be cut off by Jenkins' deputies. Daniels himself hesitated, his face contorted with rage as he realized his plan was falling apart. In that moment of hesitation, Isaac made his move. Despite his wounds, he emerged from cover and tackled Daniels from his horse, both men crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Daniels' gun went flying as they grappled in the dirt. Savannah rushed forward, retrieving Daniels' fallen revolver and pointing it at him as Isaac pinned him to the ground. It's over, Frederick, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. You've lost. Daniels' face twisted with hatred. You think this changes anything? You'll always be looking over your shoulder, wondering if I'm coming for you. You'll never be free of me. Yes, she will, Isaac said, his voice deadly calm, because you're never going to see the outside of a prison again. Sheriff Jenkins and his men quickly took control of the situation, disarming and restraining Daniels and his hired guns. As Jenkins approached Savannah and Isaac, his expression was a mixture of relief and concern. Saw the smoke from the gunfire halfway to town, he explained. Gathered every man I could find. Looks like we got here just in time. Your timing is impeccable, Sheriff, Isaac said, wincing as he stood. His shirt was stained with fresh blood where his wound had reopened during the fight. You need a doctor, Savannah said, moving to support him. So do you, Isaac replied, nodding toward a graze on her arm she hadn't even noticed in the heat of battle. As Jenkins' men led Daniels away, the businessman continued to hurl threats and insults, his face purple with rage. Savannah watched him go, feeling not triumph but a profound weariness. It was over, truly over, but at what cost? Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. He can't hurt you anymore, he said softly. You're free, free. The word echoed in Savannah's mind as the doctor from Willow Creek tended to their wounds back at Isaac's cabin. Free to stop running. Free to put down roots. Free to consider a future beyond mere survival. As night fell, the last of Jenkins' men departed, leaving Savannah and Isaac alone once more. The cabin had been cleaned of the day's violence, though bullet holes in the walls and furniture remained as stark reminders. They sat side by side on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. Isaac's arm was in a sling, the doctor having determined that one of the bullets had chipped his collarbone before exiting. Savannah's wound had been minor, requiring only a few stitches. What will happen to Daniels? She asked after a long, comfortable silence. Jenkins says he'll face charges for attempted murder, among other things, Isaac replied. With so many witnesses, he'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Savannah nodded, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders. And what happens now, to me I mean? Isaac turned to look at her, his expression serious. That depends on what you want, Savannah. You can go anywhere, do anything. You're free to choose your own path. And if my path leads me to stay in Willow Creek, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a smile slowly spread across Isaac's face. Then I'd say Willow Creek would be lucky to have you. Savannah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. What about you, Isaac? Would you be lucky to have me? Isaac reached for her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. I think you know the answer to that. I'd like to hear it anyway, Savannah said, her heart pounding. Isaac's blue eyes met hers, filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. Savannah Brooks, meeting you has been the greatest fortune of my life. These past days, despite all the danger, have been the most alive I've felt since before the war. If you chose to stay, not just in Willow Creek but here with me, I'd consider myself the luckiest man in Wyoming territory. Tears welled in Savannah's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. I've been running for so long, she whispered. I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place. We can figure it out together, Isaac said, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Day by day. I've been hurt, Isaac, Savannah admitted, voicing the fear that still lingered despite everything. Hurt in ways that aren't as visible as these wounds. Isaac's expression softened with understanding. Then let me be gentle, he said, his voice a promise. Let me show you that not all men are like Daniels. Let me earn your trust however long it takes. As the stars twinkled overhead and the night wrapped around them like a blanket, Savannah made her choice. She leaned forward, bridging the small distance between them, and pressed her lips to Isaac's in a kiss that tasted of new beginnings. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Savannah felt a smile forming on her lips, a real smile, unguarded and free from fear for the first time in longer than she could remember. Day by day, she agreed. In the weeks that followed, Savannah and Isaac settled into a rhythm that felt both new and somehow familiar, as if they had been waiting their whole lives to find this particular dance. As Isaac's wounds healed, Savannah helped with the ranch work, discovering a natural affinity for the cattle that surprised them both. In return, Isaac supported her as she began making plans to open a small bakery in town, using his wagon to transport supplies and lumber from the nearby sawmill. News of Daniel's trial reached them through Sheriff Jenkins. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with multiple witnesses to his crimes not just in Willow Creek, but in other towns where he had pursued Savannah. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in the territorial prison, effectively ending the threat he posed. On a warm evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch of the cabin that had become their home, Isaac took Savannah's hand in his. I've been thinking, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that she rarely heard. The ranch is doing well. Your bakery will be ready to open by fall. Maybe it's time we made things official. Savannah's heart skipped a beat. Official. Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring, simple but beautiful with a single pearl set in its center. I'm not a man of many words, Savannah, but I know what I want. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to face whatever comes our way together. Tears filled Savannah's eyes as Isaac slid from the porch step to one knee before her. Savannah Brooks, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, Isaac Blackwood, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Savannah marveled at how far she had come from that frightened woman working in a saloon just months ago. She had found not just safety but love, not just escape but a home. They were married on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the blue Wyoming sky. The entire town of Willow Creek turned out for the celebration, Sheriff Jenkins standing proudly as Isaac's best man while the saloon owner's wife, Mrs. Holloway, served as Savannah's matron of honor. The bakery opened the following week to immediate success, with Savannah's bread and pastries quickly becoming famous throughout the county. Isaac expanded the ranch, hiring 2 young cowboys to help with the growing herd, and built an addition to the cabin that doubled its size. As winter approached, bringing with it the promise of long evenings by the fire and mornings wrapped in each other's arms beneath warm quilts, Savannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this place, to this man, to this life. Standing in the doorway of their home, watching as Isaac chopped wood for the coming cold, she placed a hand over her stomach where their first child had just begun to grow, a secret she would share with him that very evening. She thought of all the miles she had traveled, all the fear she had endured, all the moments when giving up had seemed the only option. And she thought of that night in the saloon when a quiet cowboy had offered her sanctuary and changed everything. I've been hurt, she had told him, revealing a truth she had never shared with another soul. Then let me be gentle, he had promised, and he had been. gentle in his touch, gentle in his words, gentle in his unwavering belief that she deserved happiness. As if sensing her thoughts, Isaac looked up from his work, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart race. He set down his axe and walked toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. Savannah leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the safety she had once thought impossible to find. "I'm thinking about beginnings," she said, "and how sometimes the most beautiful ones come after the darkest endings." Isaac pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Well, I think we're just getting started, you and I. The best is yet to come." As the first snowflakes of winter began to fall around them, Savannah knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Their story, born in danger and nurtured in courage, was still being written. And she couldn't wait to turn the page.